Hi, I'm Liz Lumley from Finextra, and we're here at Sibos in Boston, and today I'm speaking to Christian Goerlach of Deutsche Bank. So the deadline for intraday liquidity is coming up very quickly, January 1st, 2015. Can you give us some details of the Basel Committee report on this?
Certainly. So the regulation proposal is all about data collection. And what is suggested is that liquidity-related data is collected not only on a daily basis, but also on a minute-by-minute basis within the day. It should be stored and then analyzed at the end of the month, and then some basic analysis like, largest position, lowest position, largest client, and so on, as well as some scenario analysis, what would happen in the stress and things like that. That then gets reported to the respective local regulator. What is important to know is that what the BCBS issued is not regulation, it is regulation proposal, and it's basically up to the national regulator to implement this into law, which would then be binding for the banks. So what we see here at the moment is basically regulation proposal for data collection on the intraday liquidity space.
Interesting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about industry readiness. I mean, SWIFT is reporting that only 18% of their payments are done on an intraday basis. Does that really say to you that the industry isn't ready?
True. However, as I just described, what we have is regulation proposal, and we just have to see that how national regulators will take this up, whether they will take it into local regulation, or if they amend it, or if they add to it. So all of these questions are still open in most of the jurisdictions, and therefore most of the banks are not trying to make an investment when they do not exactly know what the requirement will be in their respective jurisdiction. So what we require here is to have this active dialogue between the banks and also with the regulators, and that is where events like the Sibos here in Boston are so important.
So we're here at the latter half of 2014. What are some of the issues banks are still facing, and how are they going to sort of deal with those in the future?
So I would say it could be summarized that we're working on this on 3 different levels. So one, the basis I already alluded to, that is really the data collection. Banks are not set up today to report data on a minute-by-minute basis intraday. Historically, it was all one day after the other. So there are huge investments required, there are changes in processes required, and how are we responding to it? Basically, you can see a lot of this here at the Sibos, because there are also IT service provider and consultants that are showcasing what solutions they have for the industry to help with it. So that is really the first layer, that is the data collection. Then we have a second layer, which is the data transmission. Because once we have collected all this data in the banks, it is required to exchange this data between the banks. That is because we all have correspondent banking with each other. So all the foreign currency transactions we send to another bank. In order to know what our liquidity position was within the day, this bank has to send us the reporting. And it can only be the second best solution if every bank starts sending around data in their own proprietary format, and then the receiving bank has to pull this all together into their report for the regulator. And what we really should do is that we should come together as an industry and define on how we would like to inter-exchange this data. So we have data collection, we have data transmission, and last but not least, there is still the topic of the overall framework of the intraday regulation. Like I said, at the moment we are discussing data collection, and it is not clear what this data will be used for or what the outcome will be. And data collection and analysis is not risk management, and eventually what we will require to do is risk management, because we all share the same goals for financial stability. So therefore, this discussion also has to go on at the same time, so that we get an idea of what does the data tell us that we are now collecting, how are we using it, and what is the overall bigger framework that we can use. And also here, it is the event like the Sibos where we could come together not only to see clients, but also to meet with peers, with regulators, to have this chat, to exchange the information, and to form a view on where we want to go with the industry with regard to this topic.
I think any issue in banks, it always comes down to the data. So, I agree with a lot of what you say. Thanks.